The pilot to the HBO series The Time Traveler's Wife was released last night. Let's recap episode 1. A little background. So, The Time Traveler's Wife is a 2003 best-selling romantic time travel novel by Audrey Niffenegger that was adapted to screen in 2009 and starred Rachel McAdams and Eric Bana. It was a hit. It ended up grossing 100 million worldwide, and I think it was released in 3 international markets. This new iteration is a 6-episode series. I'm unsure if HBO has ordered more for this season, more episodes for this season. Maybe we'll get an announcement at the upfronts, which take place this week, starting today. Rose Leslie, who I remember from The Good Fight, stars as Clare Abshire, and Theo James stars as Henry DeTamble. So this takes place in Chicago and follows librarian Henry, who has the gene and ability and power to transport involuntarily to and from different times and dimensions, while the love of his life, Clare, waits for his return. Now, this episode was primarily backstory for those unfamiliar with this world. It set the tone and the rules of this world of time travel. So people who are unfamiliar with the books or people who are unfamiliar with the 2009 adaptation can get an understanding of the rules of this time travel world. It's a sci-fi romantic drama. Henry is a time traveler with variants who sparingly disappears in time and space. The story is centered on Henry's variants finding the love of his life, Clare, as he pops in and out of her life at various stages of their love life. There are some moments that audiences who aren't familiar with how Clare meets Henry can feel uncomfortable, so I'd like to warn you about that. It gets a little cringy. It's not exactly a meet cute how they meet. Clare meets Henry as a young girl in the backyard of her parents' estate, naked. And at this point in this story, in this episode, he's 36. Of course, she never sees Henry naked, but there are uncomfortable implications in this scene that could lead you to feel uneasy, as if it's grooming. At this point, young Clare thinks she has an imaginary friend, like most young kids believe. And that's easy to sell to her parents, who are distracted with other things, including her brother. And like many parents during this stage, this imaginary friend is believable from her parents' point of view that she has an imaginary friend. But is he an imaginary friend? Does Clare really think that this Henry doesn't exist? Henry explains as much as he can to young Clare and to young Clare's mind, and she holds on to it until she sees him the next time. And we'll see, for the most part, that she spends her life waiting for Henry to return to her. This episode, in the beginning of this episode, Clare is sitting documentary interview style explaining to someone off camera who we can't see about her unique courtship and love with Henry. So at this point in the story, we don't know if she's speaking to a documentarian, she could be speaking to her parents, she can be speaking to her child. I won't explain that arc at this point. We don't know who she's speaking to, but it feels like it's documentary style, or that's what I felt. Every time space dimension Henry pops into, he's naked. That's one of the rules of this world. And that's explained in this episode. Oftentimes, these sudden teleports are dangerous also, because we'll see that Henry, when he has to steal clothes and steal food and so forth, because he gets sick and he's hungry when he teleports, and sometimes he has to get in these fights so that he can get clothes, because he can't walk around Chicago naked without being arrested. They're sudden teleports and they're very dangerous. We even see at one point that he almost gets hit by the A train. Now Henry knows his past and future. We see in this episode, he goes back to his birth. Well, he knows as far back as his birth, but we do see him interacting with himself as a kid, and he sort of warns his kid self that, or kid variant, what he could go through in life, so that he is prepared. And we also see him see older Henry, 36-year-old Henry, interacting with his 28-year-old variant, who is at this point probably the worst of the variants. We also meet Henry's parents, who were time travelers, and that's how he became one. In different intervals, we'll see him interacting with the different variants, explaining the turmoil that he's been through or that he's about to go through. Claire also has to deal with the philandering variant of Henry, which Henry is about 28 years old. So, you know, she'll see women's bras and robes and so forth in his apartment. And sometimes we'll see that he's left her for 13, 14 years. Sometimes he leaves her for a day. Sometimes these intervals are very disruptive. So no matter what he's doing, he will be teleported somewhere else and leave damage behind. And we see that his apartment is destroyed, or he'll leave the water running, and so forth. We see that throughout this episode. So there is plenty of growth for not only Henry, but there's also growth for Claire. The story is predominantly from Claire's perspective. We are here to understand what it's like to date, wait, and eventually be married to a time traveler. We, the audience, must suspend our natural and instinctive understanding of what a loving relationship looks like and feels like, to believe what Claire and Henry have is not only possible, but real. I'm interested in seeing what else the season has in store. This wasn't the most engaging episode. I like to get the action early on. I wish this started with more drama, because it's sort of a slow burn in a sense. I wish we started with Henry and Claire trying to conceive, so that audiences will realize what this could be like too, because they could be at their point when they're married. They could be in the middle of trying to conceive, and time just removes him from this dimension. So there's just other points in this story, in the book or in the film adaptation, where we really could have started to get audiences more engaged. Or they could have shown us the imminent death, or showed us when Claire is old, showed us something that is more dramatic, because this just was really showing audiences what the world is. And I understand that the rules have to be set, and especially for people who are unfamiliar with the IP, I totally understand that. But the rules could have been set, in the third or fourth acts, instead of just right there. I don't know. It just was slow. I'm still interested because I know the story and I see where this could go, but it was just really slow. Thank you so much. If you stuck around this long, I certainly appreciate you. Please consider liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing, and I'll see you next episode. Peace.